What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of Be Schaeffer Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here in the evening hours of Sunday, June 18th, 2023. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. As we're back in the saddle here, talking about a Cardinals series win for the first time since the 21st of May, which almost seems too unbelievable to be real, but it is real as the Cardinals went nearly a month between series victories, but they got back on the board with the final two games over the weekend against New York, taking down the Mets on Saturday and Sunday in Queens to get back in a situation where they claim a series. Now, still 8.5 games back in the Central Division. That's the bad news because the Brewers beat up on the Pirates this weekend, and so the Cardinals don't really gain any ground, but it finally feels good, I think, for the Cardinals to get that winning feeling back. It's not one that's been very familiar for them. And so even though the team is still in kind of a dire strait when it comes to the division standings in the Central, getting to 29-43, heading out to Washington, D.C., it'll be an afternoon game on Monday with the federal holiday for Juneteenth. That puts the Cardinals and Nationals on the board at about 3 o'clock Central Time, and a big opportunity for the Cardinals to continue this road trip in the right direction. But tonight on Be Schaeffer Daily, we'll break down the last couple of games. Friday's game, Cardinals lost that one. The offense didn't show up. It kind of felt like at the beginning of the series that they were in for maybe a long road trip once again. But able to right the ship on Saturday and Sunday thanks to some pretty solid performances by the offense. We'll talk about how the offense is starting to tick up. We'll break down who's hot and who's potentially looking to still get back into a good rhythm offensively. Talk about some of the performances from those games. We'll talk about the fact that Jordan Hicks appears to be, at least for right now, the Cardinals' new closing pitcher as he finished off both Saturday and Sunday's games. So all that and more coming up tonight on Be Schaeffer Daily. Thank you guys for being back with me. I do apologize for a bit of the layoff that we've had. I think this is maybe the first stretch of the season, even when I had some weekend trips I was going on, where 3 days in a row of no Be Schaeffer Daily because the Cardinals had the off day Thursday, and so we banged that one. And then nothing Friday, nothing Saturday. But we're back in the saddle here. That's something that we'll try to avoid happening too often in the future, but there were some circumstances this weekend that sort of necessitated it. I appreciate those who reached out on Friday after I had mentioned on Twitter and on YouTube that just due to some personal reasons, we wouldn't be having a podcast or a live stream on Friday. And some of you already know this, but the reason behind that was we got the news on Friday night that my Nana had passed away. And so that was just a tough night for the family for sure. And so appreciated everybody for the support on that and just being understanding as everybody was about a little delay in the Be Schaeffer Daily podcasting. And so went ahead and took Friday off. And of course, the Cardinals didn't do a whole lot to talk about on Friday as it was. And so at the time, I just did not feel like I would be able to get behind the microphone with you guys. And then Saturday, I actually, my wife and I had planned for quite some time to be at Busch Stadium on Saturday night, not for baseball, but because of the Luke Combs, Flatland Cavalry, and everybody else that was playing the concert there on Saturday. And so if you guys follow me on Twitter, you probably saw a lot of the pictures I was posting from that. Had a really good time Saturday. And then we had some family events for Father's Day today. But here in the evening, ready to get going with you guys. So once again, thanks for everybody for bearing with me. And we should be able to keep the podcast rolling here pretty regularly. But thanks to all the folks who reached out, and everybody was really kind about everything. So I appreciate that tremendously. If you guys are not subscribed on Spotify, would love you to follow the show, Be Schaeffer Daily, on Spotify. You can check it out on Apple Podcast as well. And head to YouTube, youtube.com/@BeSchaeffer12. Same as my Twitter handle, Instagram handle, and everything like that. The Brenden Schaeffer YouTube channel, where we have been doing a lot of live streams, have been getting it rolling with the live chat. It gets hot and heavy. And I'm kind of curious, the next live stream we do, which will hopefully be early this week, maybe be able to get to it on Monday, but sometime for sure early this week. Curious to see how Cardinals fans will be feeling after finally the Redbirds getting back into the saddle with a series win. Like I had said, Friday was a tough one, and they just really they didn't show a lot of fight in that game on Friday, but we saw a different version of the Cardinals in the next couple of days, and I think you can trace it back to one man in regard to the offense, which a lot of offensive contributions from different players, but I do find it noticeable that the Cardinals finally get this series win, and it comes in a stretch of games where Jordan Walker homers in consecutive games, hitting one out on Saturday and then again in Sunday's game on Father's Day. Starting to heat up. Jordan Walker now with another 10-plus game hitting streak. I think on Sunday extended that to 11 games. And I believe Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch had the stat that in Cardinals history, there have been just three players, who in age 21 or younger season compiled multiple 10-plus game hitting streaks. Because, of course, Jordan Walker had a dozen or 13 in a row to begin the career back at the beginning of the season. I forget the exact number, but he set the record, Ted Williams, all that good stuff. And then now he's doing it again, extending the hitting streak to 11 games in Sunday's game. Only three people have ever done it. Jordan Walker joining Albert Pujols and Rogers Hornsby. Hornsby, of course, in the Hall of Fame. Albert Pujols will be a first ballot Hall of Famer, should be unanimous. I know that's something that's rarely happened in the history of the Cooperstown Hall of Fame, but I can't fathom anybody not including Albert Pujols on their first ballot, which is all to say some pretty impressive things that we're seeing right now from Jordan Walker. You know, he had the nice start to the career, and then the weird situation where it seemed like they weren't sure he was going to get outfield playing time regularly, and so the Cardinals send him to Memphis. They say he wants that they want to see him work on launching the ball into the air more instead of hitting so many ground balls, which to me felt a little nitpicky. I understand that, and we said this at the time, understood the reasoning behind it, but also when it comes to 20-year-old baseball players, at the time he was 20, now he's since turned 21 in May. When it comes to guys that are this young, what do you always hear about the notion that, oh, he'll grow into his power, and once he does, kind of look out? And sometimes that's just something that has to come with time. The Cardinals wanted to manufacture, though, more of that from him, and so they got him to AAA for the first time in his career, by the way, because he finished up last year in AA Springfield and never did play a game for the Memphis Redbirds until earlier this season. So was working on those things down there, and then you all saw the interview that we talked about here on B Shape Daily, where he basically said, oh, a lot of that got into my head a little bit too much, and really I just got to go back to being me and trusting my swing, because if I'm not making contact at all, who cares whether the contact is in the air or on the ground? It's not going to serve much of a purpose. So a lot of that was Jordan Walker just kind of getting back to his instincts while also still trying to, I think, implement some of the things he was working on down there with the hitting coaches and things of that nature. But Jordan Walker has since come on strong upon returning to the Cardinals, and he's slugging the baseball. He's putting the ball in play with authority. He's taken some walks. I'm looking here at his last 7 games splits. He's 9 for 24 with a couple of home runs, which came in the last 2 days. But the 5 walks versus 6 strikeouts is another one that stands out to me. And again, strikeouts are commonplace in today's game, but the fact that he is counteracting some of that by also taking his walks lately, I think is just really impressive. He's got the numbers on the season now up to an OPS of 850, which, that's pretty notable to me. The fact that, well above where Nolan Gorman is, a guy who really started strong and then kind of has cratered off a little bit. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about everybody in the lineup and kind of take a census a little bit of where these guys are right now. But to think that Jordan Walker is right there behind Goldschmidt in terms of OPS, Goldie's at 874 and had a nice weekend as well with a home run that he hit on Saturday and then had a 2-run double as well in Sunday's win. So you can trust that Goldschmidt continuing to do nice things for the Cardinals offensively. But other than that, Jordan Walker has been like the most impactful hitter. Nolan Arenado had a big weekend as well, using the dad strength on Father's Day to hit a couple of home runs for the Cardinals. The second of which ended up getting that kind of response from the Cardinals bench that I think everybody was looking for. And we've spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about the body language of this team. And I think you did see a difference in Saturday and Sunday, especially with what it looked like when Arenado hit the go-ahead home run. Jordan Walker is there on deck, just absolutely going nuts, and everybody in the dugout, arms raised, they're clapping, they're on the front rail. Things you like to see. Brandon Kiley put the GIF up there on Twitter. He's at BK Sports Talk. Brandon Kiley of 101 ESPN. But he made this tweet and said the STL Cards body language has been so bad for so long that I forgot what it looks like when they're starting to believe in themselves. Brandon Kiley added, this is what it's supposed to look like when your teammate hits a massive home run. And I agreed with it. I know a lot of people, it's kind of the debate going on Twitter as well. Does this body language thing mean anything, or is it just being completely overblown? And I retweeted BK and said, to all the people who said the previous body language stuff was being overblown, do you notice the difference watching this versus kind of some of the things that we had seen? If you go back, you can remember, I'll probably get these out of order, but you can remember the Texas Rangers series when the Cardinals won a game down there in Texas, and the handshake line after the fact was very lackluster, and there was a gif of that was on the broadcast, or a video clip of the guys just kind of standing around, just looking very, very lackluster in their celebration, which, again, that was to end that Rangers series, which also ended the road trip, and that was the only game the Cardinals won on the road trip. And so it's good to contextualize all these things where you say, well, that's that kind of team, even if they win a game that day, maybe they're not feeling much of a celebratory mood, whereas Sunday it was a go-ahead home run to ultimately get the Cardinals the series win that they so desperately craved in New York to kick off a road trip and have a happy flight where you actually won a series, right? It's not just like win the final game of a road trip in order to, scrape away a 1-5 stretch instead of going 0-6. So I can definitely appreciate and understand the differences, why they maybe wouldn't have been going so rah-rah during the other times. But I think the problem, too, is some people were tweeting back at me after they were sending the gif of Alec Burleson kind of walking through the dugout after a home run there in that 1-0 win over the Rangers, where everybody's just looking kind of pretty bored in the dugout. But people would say, well, that's multiple pitches later that they're showing it. We can't always control what the TV cameras are going to show and when they show it. And so it's best not to just snipe out an opinion based on these little 3-second clips that we view. But there was one of Jordan Walker that I can recall that he's rounding the bases, and it's just Andrew Kisner kind of banging the front rail, and everybody else is at best giving a little golf clap, just kind of very nonchalant about it. So, that was another example. And I think there was even an additional example. It wasn't the moment that I was sent by Scott there on Twitter of the Cardinals Gifts tweet where Cardinals Gifts captioned it, all smiles after that potential game-winning bomb from Burleson. And it was some sarcasm there because there were no smiles in the dugout. But it's fair to say that's an 0-2 count on the next batter. Probably not the best example of the reason that we would say, hey, is this Cardinals team got a body language issue going on? I think even earlier, before that, in the clips that you saw from that Burleson home run, it was kind of lackluster in terms of the way the team was going about it. And that was, I think, the thing that I noticed on a couple of different occasions, maybe 2 or 3 different occasions during the long losing skid that they had, especially on that road trip. I do think it was a thing. And now I think it's very easy to say, well, now the team is winning and they won a game on Saturday, and you see an opportunity then late with a go-ahead home run to win on the road Sunday, and the difference is, I do agree that maybe we overblow it by kind of picking and choosing when we notice it and when we don't, but it's, again, just based on when the cameras happen to be showing those things and they put it on the broadcast. That's, in most cases, our only opportunity. But like I had said previously, for that win in Texas, I had a buddy who's a Royals fan. He was at this game, not a fan of the Cardinals, doesn't care about the Rangers, just happened to be there because he lives in the area. And he even remarked to me that, yeah, he was kind of waiting to see if there was going to be any celebration on the mound after that win in Texas, and there really wasn't. So was there a body language issue for the Cardinals? I think it was noticeable, but can it be easily explained by the fact that teams that win tend to have more fun and teams that don't tend to maybe be a little bit miserable at times? Absolutely. And it's kind of a chicken or the egg sort of argument where you say, well, can you change the mojo of a team by investing in your teammates and getting hyped about something that, is maybe not going to guarantee your win yet, but that can be something that is kind of the snowball rolling down the hill effect, and it can allow you to then manifest some of that excitement. I don't know. It's probably not as big of a deal as the amount of time that we spent on it, but I just wanted to say now that the vibes are looking much better for this team in a situation like we saw on Sunday, it's at least worth doubling back and mentioning after we did spend a decent amount of time talking about maybe the negativity of what the body language looked like for the Cardinals. So looking a lot better. They scored 5 runs on Saturday in a 5-3 win over the Mets, and that was the game pitched by Adam Wainwright, who got into the 7th inning. They take him out there, and was a little bit adventurous for Palante to get out of the rest of that 7th inning on Saturday because he walked a man, and you know what can tend to happen sometimes when you allow free base runners on. Ultimately, Palante able to finish out the 7th after giving up a hit and a walk. Gallegos looking good in the 8th. And then how about that? The order of operations being switched a little bit, and we noticed it Saturday with Jordan Hicks coming out for the 9th inning after Gio handles the 8th. And Jordan Hicks looked fantastic, striking out the side in the 9th as the Cardinals get the win on Saturday. And we'll double back a little bit to talk about the offense here in a moment, because other than the guys we've discussed like Goldschmidt, Arenado, who really Arenado struggling Saturday, but coming up with the huge game for St. Louis on Sunday. There are a couple of other guys I would like to highlight from an offensive perspective. And then with the notes that we have on Lars Nootbaar, I also want to talk about what could this team look like in terms of the alignment, especially in the outfield, and how that might affect the infield. I want to get into that as well, because Lars Nootbaar had a big day with Memphis on Sunday, which leads me to believe that he should be in short order on a flight to Washington, D.C., where the Cardinals will begin their next series on Monday. So we're going to talk about some of the offensive stuff, but I want to still get into this from the bullpen core and the fact that it looks like Jordan Hicks is the team's new closer, and the fact that he can do it back-to-back in a situation where Sunday starting pitching let you down. The Cardinals, to win a game like they did on Sunday, where Matt Liberatore only gives you 4 innings and just didn't really look sharp. Curveball didn't look sharp, had only thrown 77 pitches, so it wasn't really a pitch count issue when he's removed after just 4.0 innings pitched, but a couple of walks, 4 hits, and I'll be darned if just about everybody doesn't come around to score against him. 5 runs, all earned, and did give up 1 home run. So that's a step back for Liberatore, and if the Cardinals are able to sort of work their way back into consideration in this NL Central, we're getting into that period of the next month to maybe 5 or 6 weeks where they've got to evaluate, can Liberatore down the stretch be expected to give this team quality starts on a regular basis to where they can continue to rely upon him in the 5 spot of the rotation. Like I've said, you got to give him the leeway to work through some of these struggles. But the ERA of 6.12 is what it is right now for the Cardinals, and so it's going to get to a point where he'll have to prove it. Otherwise, I think it would be reasonable, as long as the Cardinals are within striking distance, to consider maybe all avenues in terms of trade possibilities. But don't have a lot else to add to the Liberatore game other than you go 4 innings and give up 5 runs, and then you have Chris Stratton giving up a 2-run home run in the 5th inning of a game. If that's your situation and you still win that game, what a performance it must have been by the offense. But I want to credit the rest of the relief corps as well. Guys like Palante, they needed him on Sunday, and he comes through with an inning in the 3rd after pitching in Saturday's game as well. Drew Verhagen improving to 4-0 on the season. Has not been given a loss ever, and he's got now 4 wins that he's been credited with. Inning and 2/3 of clean baseball on Sunday in a game that was definitely hanging in the balance. Obviously, with the home run from Arenado, the second of the game, coming there in the 8th inning, the top of the 9th inning, allowing Verhagen to get credited with that win. I mean, that's a leverage spot if there ever was one, right? Like, if you're Ollie Marmol, you don't have a lot of options when your starter only gives you 4, and you've got to cover basically 5 innings of leverage, which is what it was, because this game ended up being tight all the way to the very end. But when you have that situation brewing, and then you're getting ready for the 9th inning, and you've got double barrel down in the bullpen. They had Jordan Hicks working, and they had Giovanni Gallegos getting ready. And normally, if this were a couple weeks ago, you would think, okay, if they take the lead here, Gallegos gets the ball, and he's going to have a save opportunity. If not, Jordan Hicks probably is the guy that maybe goes, because it's not a save chance. The roles have been completely reversed, and I have a hard time arguing that it's not the right call. I think it is, the way that Jordan Hicks has been pitching. And I know that potentially sets up some very scary scenarios for Cardinals fans down the stretch, because, yeah, Jordan Hicks has been prone throughout this season to give away the free pass. He's walked the first batter that he's faced almost as many times as any reliever in MLB this season when it comes to walking the first batter of a relief appearance. That's been kind of a problem for Jordan Hicks this season. However, it's been more few and far between in some of these recent appearances that he's had. And you can look at his numbers over the past, I'll just check it out here, the past 15 games, which I don't know exactly how far that stretches back for him, but he's got a 1.56 ERA over his past 15 appearances, and that's with a .07 whip. So he has really been locking it in. You remember earlier this season, Jordan Hicks had an ERA, in the 6 or 7 range, it seemed like there for a little bit. he's been able to level those numbers out quite considerably to where he's now at a 4.15 ERA. And at least with what we saw on Saturday and Sunday, Ollie Marmol not hesitating to go to Hicks in a save situation on back-to-back days. That's huge. I mean, he's one of the MVPs of this series win for the Cardinals. For them to be able to come away from New York with 2 out of 3, despite losing game 1, and doing it in a pretty flat style where they just didn't come remarkably close. Miles Mikolas was getting hit around on Friday. I was just noticing, man, every time he threw a breaking ball, I don't know if he was tipping or telegraphing it, but just from my vantage point watching on TV, I'm like, oh, that mechanical delivery looks like it's going to be a curveball. And I can't identify. I'm not smart enough. These pitching coaches and analysts probably do a better job of it than I ever could. But I was looking at Mikolas going, this dude's just, the curveball looks so flat. And it's not, it's not sharp. It's kind of laying up in the zone. And it was batting practice on Friday. So to go from that in a game where the offense was just lifeless in that game, to be able to do what they did to bounce back and win a series, despite some of the real hardships of Sunday in particular, where your starter only goes 4 innings and gives up 5 runs. That's just a credit to the offense for staying with it and being able to get it done. I was impressed too with what the offense did on Saturday against Kodai Senga, who has got the nasty forkball. And I figured it would be a heavy day of strikeouts for the Cardinals offensively, and it was, with 8 strikeouts for Senga. But he ends up getting into the 7th inning, but you were able to punch 4 runs across against him, a couple of home runs. And so that, I thought, was a really telling sign for the Cardinals, where coming into the game, I thought there'd be no hope. I thought Senga is probably going double digits in terms of strikeouts, and Adam Wainwright's just been getting hit around so much that it's hard to think he's going to be able to keep enough balls in play to be able to give the Cardinals a chance to win against a really tough customer on the other side. Adam Wainwright gave up a couple of home runs in that game on Saturday, but for him to get through 6 1/3 and get them a quality start, I'm still going to call that a step forward for Waino. And it really does feel like this year, and I know his ERA is still kind of gnarly, 5.56 for Adam Wainwright. Does get win number 198 for his career. I get that the numbers don't look great. When you have a 5.5 ERA and we're in mid-June, you kind of reach a point where you go, maybe that's just what he is now. I would say this, remember that he did miss the first few weeks of the season with injury, and so his numbers can still change for the better here if he's able to put up some zeros in some future outings. He's got to get rid of those couple of pitches per game that get taken deep. And it's a hard thing to do. It's easier to say when you understand that pitch to contact is just going to be part of Adam Wainwright's game in 2023. It's just the reality of where he is. Only 3 strikeouts in that game on Saturday, but he pitched well enough to give a sliding Cardinals team a chance to win, and credit to him for grinding it out. Credit to, as I mentioned, the bullpen with Palante, Gallegos, and Hicks getting it done. I like the order of operations there. I think they're going to need Gallegos to be really sharp, and it was good to see him have a good game Saturday, but they're going to need Gallegos to still be a key spot, a key guy in this bullpen, because you can't just have one guy do it all every time. We learned that when it came to Ryan Helsley, that you say, well, he's not going to be available all these games. I would imagine that Jordan Hicks, after a back-to-back, is not going to be available on Monday afternoon. And so that's going to be a spot where Gio is probably going to have to get back into the mix after just one day of rest. They rode Palante pretty heavily. He got up to 98 miles per hour with a couple of his fastballs over the weekend, and he can definitely get it up there. Is really trying to work his way into some more consideration, I think, for leverage. But just because you have to, right? Without Ryan Helsley in this bullpen, we've talked about how the totem pole kind of, everybody needs to move up one rung on the ladder to handle situations that typically they haven't been very accustomed to. And if guys like Chris Stratton, who had been solid in the early stage of the season, go out like he did on Sunday and give up a 2-run home run, a couple of walks, and I think it was Tommy Pham that ended up getting Chris Stratton in that one. Like that's going to end up being a little bit tricky because you just don't have a ton of other options. So really good that Verhagen emerged from Sunday's game. But again, how much confidence do you have in Drew Verhagen coming into a leverage spot the next time? How much do you have in Gallegos after some hot and cold recently? How much even do you have in Jordan Hicks, which I think a lot of Cardinals fans would say, well, I look at the numbers and I can say, well, I should be confident. I look at 103, 104, and I should be confident. but I would say still his command was a little bit saucy when it came to the fastball on Sunday, missing some locations, but can get away with it when you're doing it at 103. But again, what will happen when he does walk that bat or things do feel like they're going off the rails a little bit? Like the rescue guys in this bullpen, they aren't really there. It's going to be really interesting to see how Ollie Marmol has to manage things moving forward. Because, again, when I look at bullpen management, I look at some of the issues that this Cardinals relief corps has had, I think among the most blown saves in MLB this season, which is kind of maybe a little bit of a misnomer just because it doesn't mean always the ninth inning those blown saves are coming. But you'll get credited as a reliever with a blown save if you're the seventh inning or eighth inning and your team is up by a save situation. And even though we know modern baseball, you're probably not finishing that game with a 2 or 3 inning save. It's still considered a blown save in those late innings when you give up the lead. And so the Cardinals have had leads that have been blown by their relief corps with some frequency. And it's just a little bit of a scary notion, I think, coming into this stretch where they've got to basically be perfect. You can't have a huge margin for error. You've used it up already, even after the wins that they accrued on Saturday, Sunday. You're still looking at a team that's 14 games below 500, 8.5 out in the division. It doesn't do the Cardinals right now much good to be looking at the standings and things like that. You just have to continue to go win series is really going to be the bottom line. And Ollie Marmol would say, well, you just got to win every day and try to win that day's game. And that's what they're going to continue to try to do. They have a real opportunity here with going to Washington and then maybe getting some team mojo on that London trip. I know it's only 2 games against the Cubs out there in London, but they're definitely going to have to take advantage of every opportunity that they have. I think the bullpen is going to be a big part of that, and I'll be very curious to see how they sort of cope with no Ryan Helsley for a little while, and we'll see if he's able to make it back maybe after that London series. But when it's a forearm strain, that's a little ominous, and I would say right now you just have to kind of put the notion of Helsley's return out of mind. And for the Cardinals, it's keep it as close as you can in this division. And then, Mo, I think you have to look at going and getting some bullpen help. If, in fact, 2023 can be salvaged, it may have to be done with some reinforcements added because you've got some guys that can definitely rise above their station. If a Drew Verhagen can pitch like he did on Sunday and Jordan Hicks can really fall into line and assimilate into that closer spot for a little while, you know that can be a game changer for sure. I just think depth-wise, you don't have the reinforcements from Memphis that you would customarily expect to be able to get the job done. The guys that I think they came into the year thinking this is what our right-handed and left-handed, handedness doesn't even matter, but our bullpen depth from the minors and that shuttle, that pipeline could look like. I think it's largely been a failure. Guys like Guillermo Zuniga, Jake Walsh, different guys down there and Zach Thompson obviously going from relief at the beginning of the season to now he's part of the starting organizational depth there as a rotation piece. So a lot of what they, I think, hoped would be there is not materialized in that way. And so it's going to be up to the guys that are there to keep it close. And then you maybe get some reinforcements if this team can prove that they're within striking distance enough to make that worthwhile. It does get a little tricky. You'd say, well, you're not adding a rental reliever to this Cardinals team, right? Because they're probably kind of out of it for 2023. Well, they're going to keep scrapping away and trying to win games. But I don't know what that number has to be. If you've got to be within 5 games or 4 games or what it needs to be for John Mozeliak around mid to late July to say, you know what, we're willing to add relief help for this roster if we believe having an edge in the bullpen could be the thing that flips us from being a handful of games out to potentially getting into the mix to win the division. And I know a lot of Cardinals fans will say, oh, don't worry about winning the division. They're not going to do anything when they get into the playoffs anyway. They're inferior to all these other NL teams. That's fine. I get it. But crazier things have happened. 2006, 2011, they sneak in both times, and it sort of just ends up being one of those deals where lightning strikes and you catch fire in the right moments. So they're not, even though Cardinals fans would not be impressed, you say at the beginning of the season, if we were talking about, hey, just win the division, that would be an accomplishment. I think you would have had a lot of angry Cardinals fans responding to that statement because the notion of just winning the Central, I don't think was enough for a lot of people coming into the year. The mindset had sort of shifted to, okay, once you win the division, how do you advance beyond that in October, which is a very niche style of baseball and very difficult to kind of ascertain what a team needs to do and how you need to be built to thrive in those moments. But that was kind of where our attention had been turned. Now you've had to completely scrap all of that. You're renovating the entire kitchen right now mid-season. That's the way it is if you're looking for just an off-the-wall analogy. You can't just expect to have a completely finished product when the entire floor is ripped up and you have to put the foundation down first. So I still think it's okay to be talking about, hey, can the NL Central be in play or not? Realistically, a lot of Cardinals fans might say, hey, that ship has sailed. But I'm still comfortable saying, hey, look, before you can talk about getting success when you get to October, you got to first get to October. And so I'm meeting the Cardinals where they live right now. And where they live is as a team just teetering on the periphery of a reasonable conversation of can they stay in the divisional race. And because the NL Central is so bad, I still think the answer to that is yes. Although watch out for the Reds, man. I said a few days ago on the last live that we did that I'd be looking at the Reds as a team to potentially surprise some people and just go ahead and never stop looking good the way they have over the past couple of weeks since calling Ellie De La Cruz to the big leagues. He had an infield single on Sunday that just boggles the mind. Ground ball down the first base line to the diving first baseman that couldn't beat him to the bag. He's a very special talent and got a lot of tools and a lot of skills. The Reds are now a couple games above 500, I believe just a game or a half game out of first place behind the Brewers, who have been winning a lot lately too. So definitely going to be curious to see how this shapes up. But the bullpen stuff, I wanted to kind of cover that because I do think it's a key aspect of where the Cardinals will look to right the ship this year. And honestly, just from a on-paper standpoint, you're not super impressed with what you see in terms of like high-end ability. You like Gio, you like where Hicks is, but you know the risk is always there for him to kind of backslide into some command trickiness. And then in terms of like the depth guys, the guys like Stratton, Palante, we've seen Cabby be pretty hit and miss. Can you rely upon Verhagen in any way, shape, or form? Like down the line in that bullpen, it's going to be interesting to see how those guys trend in the days ahead, because if those guys all kind of round into form and look like they're capable of holding up zeros, regardless of situation, that could be a game changer for the Cardinals. But again, on paper, do you really expect it? Well, it worked for the last couple of days during this Mets series. They'll have to hope. I mean, it's all they can do right now because the margin for error is nothing. They'll have to hope they can be able to continue it. But I don't mind the decision. What do you think, Cardinals fans? Jordan Hicks looking to be at least temporarily sliding into that closer role as a high leverage guy, as high as the leverage gets alongside Giovanni Gallegos in that Cardinal bullpen for Ollie Marmol. Let me know what you think in the YouTube comments. YouTube.com/@BSchaeffer12. If you're listening on Spotify, head on over, type YouTube.com/@BSchaeffer12 into your URL and subscribe to the Brenden Schaeffer YouTube channel and throw your comments on there. They do have a comment ability on Spotify, but it doesn't let me as the podcast host interact with you really. So I think the best place to get your comments and kind of build that community with your fellow Cardinal fan is the Brenden Schaeffer YouTube page. So even if you listen on Spotify, feel free to drop by the YouTube comments on each video and let people know what you think. I'm curious for the thoughts on how much you're trusting Jordan Hicks right now, if he's really going to be the Cardinals closer for the interim as we kind of wait to see what the long-term ramifications on Ryan Helsley are. I had mentioned I'm going to talk about the offense, and I will kind of do a quick run-through of the lineup and tell you some impressions of where each guy is right now. But I wanted to touch on the David Freese thing first before I forget about it. And this may be something that we can expand further into when we go into the live streams or something later on this week. But because it was big news from over the weekend, I wanted to make sure at least to touch on it briefly today. As David Freese, as we found out over the weekend, I believe this was Saturday when the news came out, has declined the induction into the Cardinals Hall of Fame, which is something that, has never happened before when it comes to the Cardinals Hall of Fame. And so that was certainly not anything that anybody was expecting, I wouldn't think. But you know what? When I sit back and think about it, yes, was I initially surprised? Of course I was. When the news came across, I was as surprised as anybody else. But when you think into it and you read the statement that he put out through the St. Louis Cardinals, through the team, I think you can kind of connect some dots and go, you know what? This is what David Freese feels is right for him. And so I feel pretty strongly about Cardinals fans just kind of letting David Freese make this decision for himself. And I saw some comments. I didn't delve too deeply into the weeds on some of the replies to the tweets and some different things I've seen on social media where everybody's got an opinion on this, and sometimes it's an inflammatory one, which is what I believe led David Freese to actually tweeting about, or at least kind of referencing the situation himself, which I thought was interesting from over the weekend. I want to try to pull this one up real quick because after the news came out Saturday, David Freese says, "Thank you to all the people who have zero opinion one way or another. You know how to live your life. Enjoy the rest of your summer," with a peace sign, which I thought was kind of apt from David Freese. But here's the statement and the part of it that I think is the most important to read. It begins where he says, and this was released through the Cardinals, quote, "This is something that I have given an extreme amount of thought to, humbly, even before the voting process began. I am aware of the impact I had helping the team bring great memories to the city I grew up in, including the 11th championship, but this honor means more to me," which that last part of that sentence doesn't really make a lot. I don't really know what to make with that. But here's the line that I think was the most important, the biggest takeaway that I had from the statement. Quote, "I look at who I was during my tenure, and that weighs heavily on me." And so I think a lot of Cardinals fans took that to mean I look at who I was, and I look at my stats, my 5 years or 4 or 5 years with the Cardinals, and think, maybe I'm not worthy other than those couple of big moments in a World Series, which, again, a hard thing to dismiss because it was arguably the biggest 2 swings in Cardinals history. Again, a lot of people, if you're listening to this podcast and you're of the younger generation, I guess I can still call myself younger generation for a little while longer, turning 29 in a couple of weeks. But I was in high school when David Freese went down. When David Freese, Game 6, we'll see you tomorrow night. When all that was happening, I was a senior in high school, and I was a big Cardinal fan. I've talked on this show about how I grew up a Cardinal fan. Now I write about the Cardinals. I podcast about the Cardinals, talk about them on the radio. Different perspective for me than it used to be. But at the time, unabashed Cardinals fan. One of the best memories, surrounding my sports fandom was those couple of days period in 2011 when David Freese in Game 6 plays the hero, and then the Cardinals obviously go on to win Game 7. So if anybody is looking at this and saying, hey, David Freese is deserving of that red jacket, I would be in that group of people, because to me, when you look at the Cardinals Hall of Fame, I do think the criteria has to be different than thinking about Cooperstown in the MLB Hall of Fame. The Cardinals Hall of Fame is a fan vote. And the Red Ribbon Committee, which is usually comprised of several longstanding media members, but you've also got former managers often on those committees, different former executives, people in the know when it comes to the Cardinals baseball and more importantly, the history of Cardinals baseball. And so they'll get the ballot of deserving candidates and then allow the fans to vote on it. So a guy like David Freese, if he weren't considered worthy by a lot of people in the know and who really have seen enough Cardinal baseball over their history as a Red Ribbon Committee, I believe is the terminology for it, he wouldn't have been on the ballot in the first place. And so I know a lot of people say, wow, David Freese, showing such humility to say he recognizes his numbers might not be as good as an Edgar Renteria or didn't have as many years of contributions to the team as I just pick out Renteria because I know that he's been a guy that's been on that ballot in recent years. And, I can remember him from growing up, but he was on the Cardinals for, 5-6 years or whatever it was. Like Matt Morris was on the recent ballot, Steve Carlton, you got Joaquin Andujar. Like, these aren't necessarily although Steve Carlton, but by and large, you're not talking about MLB Hall of Fame names, but it's about the contributions to the Cardinals. And so that's how these guys end up on these ballots in the first place. And it was no doubt that the first time David Freese's name ever graced the fan vote ballot, he was going to get the most votes and he would be inducted, and that was a given. And that's exactly the way that it played out this summer. However, he ends up declining the induction as a result. But I think the people who are looking at this and saying, he looked at his stats and just, he sees that he shouldn't have been considered anyway. And I saw a lot of bogus takes about that people think it's about the numbers. And I think it's about more than that. And I'm not trying to get too personal or speak out of turn with something that maybe I'm not intimately familiar with, because I don't know David Freese personally. But he says, I look at who I was during my tenure, and that weighs heavily on me. I think, in all honesty, for David Freese, it's common knowledge, some of the things that he was going through in terms of his personal life at the time when he was with the Cardinals, and ultimately was traded away from St. Louis, I think, by the Cardinals just to kind of give him an opportunity for a fresh start, to be able to, with some of the demons he was battling and different things he was trying to manage in his personal life, to be able to not just have to always live up to the moniker of being the hometown hero and everything that went along with that, the pressures of that, I think it's something that only a guy like David Freese could really know. There's not a lot of people in your corner who you could say, oh, they know what that's like. Not many people have done the one crowning achievement of a career like David Freese did. Was a good, solid major league player for a number of years, right? But in terms of that one moment sort of defining your career and your life in many ways as a professional has got to be just something that messes with your head, I think, in the first place. But to know that he was going through some different things personally at the time and looks back on that period to probably have some very complex feelings about it. I didn't want to speak too firmly on any aspect of this because I haven't spoken to David Freese about these things. And so it's not maybe my place. But the tweet that I sent about it to kind of sum it up is when the world, your hometown, wants to tell you you're the same as Gibby, Brock, etc., from a period that was an intimate personal struggle, that's heavy. And that's kind of the way that I looked at it to say, guys, I think if you're making this about, and this is, again, why David Freese said, hey, to everybody who has no opinion one way or the other, I appreciate you. Because I think for it even to be dissected the way that he obviously knew that it would be, with the surprising decision that a lot of people didn't see coming. But I think it doesn't do David Freese any good, right, to kind of belabor this point. And I think the bottom line is I saw some wacky takes, man. People saying he owes it to Cardinals fans who, by being a Cardinal fan, they paid his salary and he owes it. Give me a break. If you're out there with that take, I don't even mind coming down with the hammer a little bit on you to say you are so far off base to make it about you. That's just selfishness as a fan. It's not your decision. It's not anything as a Cardinals fan that you're entitled to. You're not entitled to have David Freese wear that jacket. You're not entitled to say he should have a statue outside Busch Stadium. I think you're missing the point a little bit if you feel like that is the way that it ought to go down when it's David Freese's life that we're talking about, not yours as a Cardinals fan. I think selfishness, honestly, from some fans who came out and said that they had disappointment. It's okay to be disappointed because you wanted a chance to celebrate David Freese. But when you step back and realize that, you know what, it's about maybe a lot more than just your chance to get to celebrate a memory that was good as a Cardinal fan. I really do think this is a case where you just got to respect that decision by David Freese to know that, as he said in the statement, it's not one that he took lightly and it weighed heavily on him. And he mentioned as well feeling some regret over the fact that it took him so long to kind of come out with this decision. He said, I'm especially sorry to the fans that took the time to cast their votes. Cardinal Nation is basically the reason why I've unfortunately waited so long for this decision and made it more of a headache for so many people. I feel strongly about my decision, he said. Understand how people might feel about it. I get it. I'll wear it, he said, but said, thank you for always being there for me, and I'm excited to be around the Cardinals as we move forward. Again, this is not David Freese saying I don't want to be associated with the Cardinals. He's saying I don't feel comfortable being honored in that way, and his reason doesn't even matter. Honestly, it's his life. It's his opportunity to choose what he does with it, and I think that should be respected by Cardinals fans. And so I saw a lot of people go, well, I read that statement. I didn't really understand what he didn't really explain why. I would focus on that line where he talked about it weighing heavily on him, the person he was. He said, I look at who I was during my tenure, and that weighs heavily on me. To me, that says it may be about more than just baseball. And regardless of whatever it's about, it's really David Freese's prerogative to be able to make the decision that he wants to make and the one that he feels good about. So I had some disappointment with some Cardinals fans that I saw some of the takes that were flying around there about that over the weekend. But hopefully this explanation, which, again, I'm no authority on the subject, like I said, but I feel like I've got a decent read on this one where maybe it's just best that Cardinals fans, continue to give David Freese that love and just, root for him as a person to be able to do whatever makes him happy in life. Because, again, he did give you a moment as a Cardinals fan that you'll never forget. And so it's maybe not the most selfless thing to say, I need to be able to worship David Freese every year. I think it's not something he's totally comfortable with, and so there's nothing wrong with that. And you can feel free to comment on that part of this as well on YouTube. But honestly, I that's one that's going to be a little bit more of a one-sided conversation for me. I'm definitely want to know what people think, but I'm not going to argue with anybody about it because, like I said, I think I'm seeing this one better than some of the fans that I saw out there, where I just said let's respect the guy and not maybe make this about anything that it's not, and have his opportunity to move forward in whatever way he so chooses. But let me know what you think about that. Let me know, too, though, more than that, what you think about this current Cardinals team as we look into the offense a little bit, because I've talked about how this needs to be a top 5 offense if the Cardinals are going to get back into this thing and honestly avoid a pretty substantial losing season. I'm thinking 85 to 90 losses for sure if they don't end up with a top 5 offense this year. Saturday's game, you saw it coming out a little bit, and this is, the guy that I really want to highlight more than anyone is Brendan Donovan, whose name I don't think I've really said so far. He is absolutely going to have his numbers at the end of the season. I've been saying that even when he was down, that I liked the at-bats that he was taking, and now you're really starting to see it manifest a little bit more, where over the past 7 games, he's hitting .375 with a .412 on base, .469 slug. So that's an OPS pushing 900, about 881, I want to say, doing some quick math. Last 15 games hitting .305, .388 on base with a .407 slug. He's going to be an 800 OPS guy. Maybe the numbers at the end of the year won't reflect that because of the downturn he had earlier on in the season, but he's up to 736 for the OPS. The on base is up to 356. I think both those numbers end up being closer to kind of the career norms for him, which are 381 on base and 760 OPS. I think he ends up being a really nice piece offensively. He just takes one good at-bat after the next, and he can play anywhere in the field. Was in right field for the Cardinals on Saturday, and then Sunday was at first base. He's so valuable to this team. They recognize that. He went 2 for 5 with a run scored and an RBI in Saturday's game, and then Sunday, an even more impressive outing, 3 for 5 with 2 runs scored and an RBI. Had a double in that game. He is just a dude at the top of this lineup. And I think when Lars Nootbaar comes back, which I think is in the offing, on Sunday he had a four-hit game with Memphis, couple of home runs. Keely in STL, is her Twitter account, was on the beat down there in Jacksonville, was nice following her tweets about Lars Nootbaar. And I believe I saw a graphic, too, that said all his hits were above 100 mile per hour on the exit velo. Couple of home runs, a double, and a single in that game. So I don't know if they need to see more from him playing the field to get comfortable, or if they can just go ahead and book that flight to D.C. and get him there to be in the outfield for Monday's game. I don't know how quickly that turnaround is going to be, but clearly he seems to be back on the up and up after dealing with the back injury, the back spasms, as it was phrased. Should be ready to go, it seems like, based on that performance. And so when that happens, it's going to be interesting. What happens to this Cardinals alignment? Nolan Gorman has really been going through it a little bit recently. Had another kind of tough weekend where the hits are not really coming for him in the way that we're really used to seeing. A couple of offers on Saturday and Sunday. Check it out. His recent numbers for his last 15 games, 115 average with a 231 slug. That is very not Nolan Gorman-like, and we're talking about a multiple-week sample at that point. And you could even go back to his last 30 games where you still got the 6 home runs in those 30 games, and so that's still like a 30 home run pace. But it's really slowed down considerably of late. And over those 30 games, a 200 average, a 391 slug, 276 on base, which would equate to about a 660, 670 OPS, which is very much not what you've come to expect of Nolan Gorman. And so does it get to the point where the Cardinals no longer consider him a full-time player? I would say that for sure, where we thought, he's playing lefty-righty, doesn't matter, which was that Dodgers series, honestly, that we talked about close to a month ago. The last time the Cardinals won a series, that was kind of the coming-out party for Nolan Gorman in terms of batting against lefties and righties. I think he homered off of Julio Urias in that series. He homered off of another lefty reliever of the Dodgers and had a big-time series in that May. It was like 18 through 21. And then we just haven't really seen him ever since then kind of maintain that momentum that we thought he was picking up. So I don't know what ends up happening, because you could go Donovan every day at second base if you're going to start to view Gorman as more of a part-time piece. My thing is Jordan Walker is going to carry this team offensively. He needs to bat, to me, ahead of Contreras in the lineup, even though we did see a home run from Contreras on Friday, I believe is when he hit that home run. And, Cardinals need... I remarked this to my dad on Sunday. I just said, if they just had that one more veteran that is going to be a stable veteran force in the lineup, not necessarily on the level of Arenado and Goldschmidt, but just like give me that 800, 815 OPS from another guy who's been around the block and you just know the consistency will be there, then this team really could take off, I think, because you're getting what you're going to get. I think Donovan can be a very consistent guy, but he's going to be more of a leadoff. Nootbaar, when he comes back, I think, again, you're going to I would go Nootbaar, Donovan 1 and 2. I've already made that decision. I think you bump Goldschmidt to 3, Arenado to 4. The packaging those two righties around Nolan Gorman and sort of that 2-3-4 sandwich doesn't work anymore with the way that Gorman has been struggling. And so you kind of bump back to what you're familiar with from previous times. And to me, I'm putting Walker 5th in that alignment. There's a case to be made for Walker batting 2nd, but I just like the at-bats that guys like Donovan and Nootbaar can take to kind of work a pitching staff to kick off a lineup. Put Goldie and Arenado behind those two, and then Walker, for me, is the 5-hitter on this team until further notice. He's just been taking really good ABs. And then if Gorman's in the game, you maybe bat him 6th. I could see wanting to break up the monotony of the righties a little bit if you wanted to bat him 5th and then have Walker 6th. But I just think right now, again, it comes down to if you have a big game at bat to try and make a difference late in a game, would you rather it be Gorman or Walker right now? And to me, it's no contest. It's Jordan Walker with the way he's seeing the ball. And so I think you bump Gorman down a little bit, but there's also a conversation of who's in the lineup, because when Nootbaar comes back, where does he play? Do they continue with this Tommy Edman in center field situation, which I don't want to diminish Tommy Edman because I think he's done an admirable job in center, but has he done a good enough job that we're like, yeah, this is the way it needs to be moving forward? Absolutely not. Not to me, and I think he's got good range and pretty good instincts for an infielder. But I just don't think he is playing at a level that you're going to supplant the rest of your lineup and make all these changes to cater it around the notion that Edman needs to remain in center field. I think Edman needs to be in the lineup for sure, though. Paul DeJong, to me, does not on a daily basis. You know, I know he's had some big moments recently, and he even hit a home run on Sunday to get his 10th of the season. And I want to kind of check out his stats here for a moment just to make sure, since I've been giving it to you last 7, last 15 days, etc. for other players. Here's where it is for Paul DeJong, who's with the couple of home runs that he's hit over the past week, has a 462 slug over that span, but with a 231 average and has not drawn a walk, 211 strikeouts. So 7 games, no walks, 11 strikeouts, 231, 462 slug. A couple of home runs are buoying the slugging percentage in that 6 for 26 stretch that DeJong has had. The 231 OBP combined with that 462 slug, some quick math, that's about a 693 OPS. It's still not enough. And you can go out further. Last 15 games, the OPS with a 218 batting average over the past 15. Just another kind of low OBP at 271, slugging 345. That's a low 600s in terms of OPS. And it's the same over his last 30 games. Paul DeJong, to me, does not have to be a regular player. Tommy Edman needs to be at shortstop more often than not, especially when we're talking about Lars Nootbaar coming back. And so what do? You put Dylan Carlson in center field, or you put Lars Nootbaar in center field if you really just don't think that Dylan's an everyday player, which offensively he's begun to trail off a little bit over the past few days. Although getting a pinch hit opportunity Saturday and coming through with it didn't show very well necessarily on Sunday. I think he was 0 for 5 with a couple of strikeouts. I still think overall I'd like to see his bat in there, but I can understand that you're going to want to give it bats to DeJong. You're going to want to keep Gorman in there as much as you can, I think, just to try to work himself through some of the struggles. You got to move him down in the lineup, though. That's the thing. If you want to play Gorman, I support it, because I talked about coming into the season, the reason I wasn't necessarily, going into the offseason, I wasn't high on the notion that Gorman would maybe even be on this team, because I thought with the way they treated him last year, which was, hey, he's in a slump. Okay, he's dead to us. We're going to put him on the bench. I didn't have the faith that they would ride Gorman, who is a streaky player and has been throughout his time in the minors as well. I didn't have the faith necessarily that they would ride him through the hot and cold stretches to be able to get to kind of the pot at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. Now we're kind of seeing that tested a little bit after his great start, and he really hit his stride in mid-May or so. And now we're kind of wondering, okay, what do they do now that he's going through another lean period? And you have guys like Brendan Donovan that just have to stay in the lineup. Brendan Donovan was the reason I thought they would trade Gorman when they were looking for a Sean Murphy or were trying to make a move for a starting pitcher, which they never ended up doing in the offseason. But once they got to spring training and Gorman was there, that's when I turned my attention and said, all right, he's an all-star. I think they're really high on what he's going to be able to do. Now we're kind of at that crossroads where they're going to have to meet in the middle on what do they believe is possible and how far are they willing to go to allow Nolan Gorman to extract that on a daily basis. I think he should play, but I also think Jordan Walker should not necessarily be in this outfield while Nootbaar, potentially Carlson on a daily basis, and whoever else you've got, right? If it's Edman, if it's Donovan that can play out there as well. I just don't know that Walker as an outfielder, they're not going to do this. They're going to leave him in the outfield, I suspect. But what I would do and what I've said I would do when this moment arrived, and I think it is about to arrive at some point early this week, is I would have personally Dylan Carlson playing center field. And if the bat ends up trailing off to where that's no longer defensible, then I get that maybe you're going to look a different direction. Although I have been largely in support of #EverydayDylan, giving him kind of the leeway to keep and earn that spot. I understand he's going to go through a little bit of struggle at times. A lot of these players do. But the way I would align it is to have Jordan Walker be the DH, which does mean you're pushing Donovan or Edman or whomever off of second base. Nolan Gorman's a good enough defender, I think, to play second base. And so I would have Nolan Gorman out there at second most of the time. And Jordan Walker's in the lineup every single day, but largely I think as a DH is an okay way to do that. So that's where I would personally have him, just because I think you can have a much more athletic alignment in the outfield if you put Edman at shortstop. So we're not playing as much Paul DeJong, but occasionally you can throw Edman in a corner outfield spot. You could throw him back in center field if you really want to. But my outfield is going to be Nootbaar, Carlson, and then probably Brendan Donovan, who I really like at second base, but I can put him in left field just the same, and he plays every day in my alignment as well. Brendan Donovan only sits when he needs a break. The at-bats he takes are so good. He's a grinder. He's the lead. I don't move him from leadoff. I put Nootbaar probably batting right behind him, and Donnie stays the leadoff guy. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from him. But that's kind of what I would do, just because I think you have a better alignment defensively in your outfield if Jordan Walker isn't in it. That being said, the Cardinals could be rewarded for the notion that they don't do that they say, nope, we know how good of an athlete Jordan Walker is. Right now, the reason it doesn't look great for him in the outfield is just because of a lack of experience with it. And the more he plays, the better he's going to get. And so if we see this through, 2 months from now, we could be rewarded by having more consistency from Walker. I just think throughout a series, you're going to have 2 or 3 plays that you're going to hold your breath on, and usually 1 or 2 of them when it comes to Jordan Walker is maybe going to go against you. And it's hard right now because we've talked about the Cardinals not having a margin for error. And so I just think they've kind of put Walker in a bad situation with how limited his exposure to outfield has been over the past 12 months, really just about the past 10 and a half months since he was told, hey, you're going to be an outfielder now. And so that's difficult for a guy who I think is leading the charge offensively for this team. 12-game hitting streak, or I think 11-game hitting streak now. Homers in each of his past 2 games, has looked really good at the plate. But on the other side, I still just think you're asking for trouble a little bit when it comes to him defensively in the outfield. I think he will get better, and I think long-term you almost need him for the flexibility to be able to man the outfield spot. And since this team is 14 games under, maybe they say, hey, I know we don't develop at the big leagues, but defensively, when it comes to this particular talent, we might just have to allow him to develop defensively at the big league level. Not saying that, the Cardinals are admitting defeat on the season by doing so, but you can also make an argument that they'll be better off in the long run if they're able to run Jordan Walker out there in a corner outfield spot and be confident, I'm talking the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, in what he's able to do defensively in one of those spots. And so this just may be the learn-on-the-job time for him. It's what I expect them to continue to do. I just don't know how they handle it in terms of Edman, if they're going to be committed still to him long-term in center field. Like he had a ball that he was going back on over the weekend that just pops out of his glove, doesn't make the play. I think that's a rarity, but also you can just tell in those moments that there's not a 100% level of comfort with some of those plays. He makes a ton of them because he's so darn athletic and he's a really good ball player. But I also think shortstop, the need could be there, and I guess they could just continue to see it through for Paul DeJong, and he'll come up with some big hits, and he'll end up with 20 to 25 home runs. There's no doubt about that. But I also don't know if in the long run you can expect Paul DeJong to continue to have good enough at-bats to justify the spot every day out there. He's got the 742 OPS, which to win the $1,000 I think from Sean from Twitter, he's got to be 750 OPS with at least 400 plate appearances. And so I think I am ultimately going to come short on that non-bet where I was told on Twitter that if he had those numbers, guy would Venmo me $1,000. Right now I would take the no side on that I'm doubtful that Paul DeJong will end up accruing the plate appearances and the OPS required to win that one. But it's interesting because if they really do like Tommy Edman in center field, and they're willing to continue to take the good with the bad when it comes to Paul DeJong and kind of hunt for those home runs and those big damaging swings, they've been fewer and farther between. But I also think the Cardinals might have an inclination to continue chasing that because they don't mind Paul DeJong's defensive play at shortstop. They think he does a nice job. So it's going to be interesting to see the wrench that Lars Nootbaar throws into the plans. What would you do if you're Ollie Marmol looking at this Cardinals defensive alignment with Nootbaar returning? I have a sinking feeling it ends up being Carlson that gets boxed out more often than not. I don't think that's the right move because all you're going to do is if eventually you're willing to trade him, you're just kind of decreasing that trade value of the guy compared to if he went out there and had the chance to show his versatility and his ability to come through at the plate, which, again, has been rather inconsistent, but there's a lot of guys you could say that about for this team right now. So let me know what you think on the YouTube comments, youtube.com/bschaeffer12 to find the YouTube channel, or if you're watching on YouTube right now, you're certainly able to comment below and make sure you subscribe to the Brenden Schaeffer channel. A lot of fun things coming on the channel throughout the remainder of the season. But I do believe that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Thank you guys for bouncing back with me for this episode of Be Schaef Daily. Like I had said off the top, Friday did not have an episode after my Nana, my mom's mom, passed away over the weekend. So tough time for the family. Thank you guys for all the support, as it'll still be a tough time, I think, for my family coming up over the next week plus and into the future as we move on without one important member of our family. But appreciate you guys for all the support, for listening, and for hanging out with me. We'll continue, as always, to talk Cardinals baseball all season long. So thank you guys. That's going to do it again for this edition of the show, and we will talk to you next time on Be Schaef Daily. Peace.